Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday morning. Boy, I tell you what a week. All right, won't go into that now, but hey, welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. I appreciate so much you being with me for my morning musings. We are looking at the doctrine of what is known as the Great Apostasy. Jesus foretold. Now, keep in mind, folks, the disciples asked Jesus, in direct response to his prediction of the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of your coming, the parousia, and the end of the age? Now, in Mark and in Luke, the question is simply, tell us when shall these things be, and what is the sign when these things shall occur? They are not talking about the, quote, end of time. They're not talking about the end of the Christian age, which has no end. They are asking about the end of the age that temple represented. You know, once you get that very simple but very profound fact firmly seated in your mind, then you know that the Olivet Discourse is simply not about any final end of the world, end of time, literal physical coming of Jesus. They weren't asking about that. They had no concept of that. So, Jesus answers their question about the sign of his coming and the end of the age. And one of the signs that he gave them was the apostasy. Let's read verses 10 to 12 one more time. In Matthew chapter 24. Many will be, and that's again, Greek word, poloi. Many will be offended and will betray one another and will hate one another. And many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. See? Many will be offended. Many will be led astray. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of the many, the love of the majority, the love of most will grow cold. Now, notice, but the one who endures to the end. What end are they asking about? The end of the age. Oh, but this gospel of the kingdom must be preached into all the world as a witness to the nations, then comes the end. What end were they asking about? The end of the age linked to the temple. Where in the world do we get the idea that there's a different end in view? Where did we ever get the justification for inserting two different ends into this context? They did not ask about the end of the Christian age or the end of time. They asked about the end of the age tied to the destruction of the temple. Now, I've shared with you thoughts on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Once again, there were some at Thessalonica who were saying the day of the Lord had already come. Paul said, no, that day, what day? The day of the Lord will not come except there come first the apostasy. The falling away. Apostasis. Apo from, stasis standing. The falling away from the standing, if you please, of that which was right. So, you really have to catch the power of this. How early was Thessalonians written? 50 to 51 AD. Some say as late as 52 or 53. I'm not going to argue that. But here's the question. Remember that Jesus predicted the coming of persecution. Remember that? Matthew chapter 24, verse 9, they will deliver you up to persecution, and many will be offended for my name's sake, and they'll fall away. Well, guess what? In 1 Thessalonians chapter 3, Paul had this to say to that church. Paul said, I sent Timothy to encourage you that no one should be shaken by these afflictions. For yourselves know that we are appointed to this. For in fact, we told you before when we were with you that we would suffer tribulation just as it happened, and you know. Well, wait a minute. Where did Paul get the idea that tribulation was coming when he preached to the Thessalonians? Was that just kind of a general thought that he had that came rushing through? Or was he reminding them of what Jesus said when Jesus said they will deliver you up to tribulation? By the way, 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 uses the same identical Greek word, thlipsis. Don't be shaken by what is happening to you, because I told you we were appointed to this. Why were they appointed to that? Because it was part of the end time narrative, the end time scheme. They will deliver you up to tribulation, many will fall away. And here Paul is writing to the church at Thessalonica and said, brethren, do not be shaken in your mind. Don't let this cause you to fall away. Don't be one of those that Jesus said would fall away. And so what we have, one more time, is full corroboration in Paul's epistles, particularly 2 Thessalonians, that illustrates for us that what Jesus foretold would happen in that generation was in fact happening. Now watch this. Galatians, written in 49, prior even to Thessalonians. Paul wrote to the churches of Galatia. That's not just a single church. It's not an isolated situation. Paul says, I marvel that you, a collective you, are so soon removed from him who hath called you into grace unto another gospel, which is not another gospel, but there are some who would trouble you. But this I say to you, that though we or an angel from heaven preach any other gospel than that which we delivered to you, let him be anathema. Do you catch the power of that? In this broad region of churches, apostasy as early as 49 AD had already set in. Here in 51 to 52, Paul's writing to the church and says, brethren, don't fall away. Don't be shaken. When Paul wrote to the church at Corinth, just go through the chapters of 1 Corinthians 15 and see how many doctrinal errors had crept in. Look at Acts 15 with the Judaizing problem that began and just swept through the churches throughout the empire. Look at how Paul described in 2 Corinthians chapter 11 of how there were false apostles in the church there, as well as in Ephesus, we know from Revelation chapter 2. In other words, everywhere we go in the New Testament, in the epistles of Paul, Paul reminded them, brethren, the Spirit speaks expressly that in the last days, many shall depart from the faith. Well, guess what? Paul knew he was living in the last days, and he knew that people were already falling away from the truth. He's not talking about a different apostasy. It was happening then and there in the first century. The book of Hebrews, the writer reminded them after they were very first illuminated, they endured a, quote, great fight of afflictions because of their faith. Once again, everywhere we look in the New Testament, we find apostasy. What Jesus predicted in Matthew 24 and in Luke chapter 18, and by the way, other passages that we could adduce, was being fulfilled on the pages of the epistles of the New Testament. The very persecution that he predicted taking place. The very false prophets that he said would arise taking place. Everything that Jesus predicted was taking place in the first century prior to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. You know what that means? That means that the apostasy of 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, just as Paul said, was already taking place. How do I know that? Because the man of sin was already there and he was already sitting in the temple. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, 4 and following. And all of this means the Olivet Discourse cannot be divided. It's not two subjects. It's not two comings of the Lord. It's not two different apostasies. It is one, quote, great apostasy, unquote. And to reiterate, that means the Olivet Discourse cannot be divided. Listen, you need to understand this. The last days are past. And as we are about to embark in a study of Matthew chapter 24 and verse 14, and its incredible significance is found in the epistles, you will see the fulfillment of every word that Jesus spoke in the epistles. We're going to have a June special for these books, $18.95. That's going to cost you about $9. Excuse me. It's going to save you around $9. I can't make this offer to overseas orders. I apologize for that. It's just simply not possible. Shipping is just too much. But $18.95 for the month of June. You won't regret it. Get the last days identified, and into all the world, then comes the end. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and you'll see a banner right up at the top. Makes it easy to order. Thanks for joining me for this morning's morning musings. In the morning, on Thursday morning, we're going to begin a study of Jesus' statement. This gospel of the kingdom will be preached into all of the world as a witness to the nations. Then comes the end. You don't want to miss it. So I'll see you on the flip side.